Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, the kiddies are back at school at MCPS with enrollment at a record high. Pepco seeks another rate increase. Purple Line construction begins even while protesters seek to derail the project. And controversy over President Trump's DACA decision. Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by education activist Cynthia Rubenstein, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, Montgomery County Young Republican and an advisor to Robin Ficker's campaign for county executive, Dan McHugh, and political strategist Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. And welcome back. Even the extended summer vacation arranged by Republican Governor Larry Hogan had to come to an end at some point. And this week, Montgomery County Public Schools opened with a record enrollment, but also some controversy. Last week, it was announced that 5 county high schools were rated among the top 5 high schools in Maryland. Now, for Walt Whitman, Winston Churchill, Thomas Wooten, and Richard Montgomery, the accolades were consistent with these schools' long-term reputation. The one surprise was Poolesville High, which took the top honor among the elite rankings. At the same time, however, a new report was released which indicated a startling gap in math and reading proficiency, particularly for Black and Latino students. Cynthia, I suppose we should be happy that the county has so many excellent schools, but as one commentator noted, Walt Whitman should be renamed Walt Whiteman since there's so few minority students there. Is there a problem that other schools have with large minority populations?
Here is the vexing problem for not only for Montgomery County's public school system, but for public school systems across the United States. Yep. And that is that student achievement is highly correlated to parent education levels and income. And the 5 A+ schools are in the parts of the county that are highly educated and high income. And that is the vexing problem that our superintendent and superintendents across the United States are trying to fix with more resources put in the right places. If Montgomery County wanted to change things drastically, we would have different housing and development policy so that we wouldn't have large enclaves of only wealthy people and large enclaves
Well, how do you, were you going to dictate where people are going to live?
No,
I mean, for 50 years we've been hearing this problem.
I'm simply saying that if we wanted to solve the problem and if we could have schools where no more than 40% of kids were low income and 60% were middle and upper income, the school performance would be more balanced and better. But what we have is this dichotomy of wealthy and educated and it's a nationwide problem.
Are less recognized schools getting sufficient resources for the students? This problem's been going on for 60 years. This isn't a new problem.
Well, yes, and actually, I mean, the MCPS has always taken credit for the work that parents have done. I mean, as a former Whitman parent, I would say we used to get a contract at the beginning of the year, and we would have to, hire tutors and help the kids and supplement the education that they were getting to a substantial degree. We weren't alone as parents. That was what kids had to do. Parents had to do.
All right, Dan, we're running out of time in this segment, unfortunately. Dan, in addition to these mixed reports was the announcement that MCPS Superintendent Jack Smith was given a pay raise, but with the increase in the achievement gap, does he deserve it?
Absolutely not. We were hit with an 8.7% property tax increase last year. More money for the schools. Make the pie bigger was what MCPS was their battle cry last year for the schools. And we're seeing once again that spending is out of control. A $15,000 raise to Superintendent Smith. While the park tests where most of the kids failed in English and math, he absolutely does not. The pie may be bigger, but the taste of the pie sure is bitter, if you ask me.
I want to go to Susan on this. Susan, do you agree with Dan, or how would you rate Smith's performance?
I think I wouldn't want Superintendent Smith's job for anything. I think it's one of the toughest in the countries because of the demographics. And our kids need things like, following up on what Cynthia said, full-time kindergarten for everybody and more resources. And she's absolutely right. When you have parents who can't speak English, the system is challenged to be able to help those students, have them in the same classrooms as others. It's a problem that, you know, is going to go on. It is certainly not unique to Montgomery County, but our population is one of the most diverse in the country.
I want to go to that's fine, but I want to go back to your point and to Mark's point. I mean, Mark says that as a parent, he was given a contract that he was expected to fulfill as a parent. The problem is, parents in poorer neighborhoods, they can't afford to hire tutors. They can't afford to hire tutors. But are the parents demanding enough from the kids?
Are parents demanding enough from
Are
the kids?
parents demanding enough from the kids?
I think parents all
'Cause
want
that's
their
where it start-
children
that's
to
where it
do
starts,
well in
doesn't it?
school. But Susan brought up the point that about early childhood education. When a child enters kindergarten, kids who come from upper income and well-educated parents have tens of thousands of more words in their vocabularies than kids who don't.
So whose
and
fault
if you
is that?
don't, you play catch up.
But if
in
you
your
are a
education.
minority parent who has 3 jobs, you cannot help your kids on the same level.
Oh, Susan, your bleeding heart is coming
Well,
out
it's
all
the
over
truth.
again.
What
Come
can
on.
parents do if you can't speak the language, if you can't speak English and you can't
You know,
help
this
your
is
children with your
insulting
homework?
to the people in Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. Not everybody in Silver Spring and Tacoma Park and the eastern side of Montgomery County are immigrants who can't speak English.
What
What
they
have
No,
to-
they
what-
aren't. But
what-
they
what-
don't
what a
have
generalization you're
they
trying
don't
to make.
have the same education level as they do in his school, and there are different expectations.
You're just
Although
making
actual-
excuses, Susan.
We're paying.
No,
I want to hear
it's
go to
not.
Mark.
I was going to
Let's
say,
wrap it up, Mark.
our foreign-born population in Montgomery County tends to have a much higher educational level than in other areas of the
That's
country.
not true.
All right,
oh,
well,
but
I want to
It's
go
a
on.
mix. It is a mix. It's a mixed
It
bag.
depends on the
It's a-
race.
it's-
I
it's
got to
mixed.
wrap this up because before we leave school system, I mean we can debate this particular topic to death. There was another story concerning the school report that came out when the exclusive private school Green Acres. Where's Olivia and all the other crew from that television show, would not allow its students to wear Washington Redskin emblems at school. Well, MCPS continues to follow past protocols, which allows the students to wear the football team's logo to class. Dan, what do you make of this controversy, or is it even a controversy?
Well, we are in Montgomery County. We are in the DMV area. Montgomery County is Washington Redskin country. You can move statues if you want out of Montgomery County, but when you mess with my football team, you've gone too far. My response is, hail to the Redskins, hail victory, Braves on the warpath, fight for all DC.
All right, Susan.
It's
there's
not
so much ado about nothing.
It certainly is. Private schools can do anything that they want. Quakers, Sandy Spring, and Sidwell already banned such stuff, and if they want to do it, who are we to say? I agree totally. Coming from Minnesota, where there's a large Native American population, I think it's wrong, and they're doing the right thing.
Nobody's disagreeing that they have the ability to do it. I think we all can agree they're private institutions. What we're saying is, does it make sense? And that
If it's okay with them, why
It's
should
not a
we?
bad thing to do it, because
What do you mean it's
the
not a bad
term,
thing to
the
do?
term,
Ridiculous.
the
It's
term
absurd.
it is a
Absurd.
disparaging term.
Outrageous.
So it's not a bad thing to do it if the school believes that
It
this
is
is
the
a
most
principled
It is the most
stand to
popular
take
sports team in this
not
area for
disparaging
decades.
Native Americans.
Well, all right. So I mean, we're never going to solve this issue because everybody agrees that it's disparaging. We've had
send your kids there is what I'd said to
surveys that
someone.
show that even Native Americans are not offended by it, and the patent office has ruled that they continue to use the logo. So we're going to have to live with this for a long time to come. All right, now to our next topic for this segment. With great fanfare, a groundbreaking ceremony was conducted marking the opening of the Purple Light Rail Transit. Cynthia, opponents are still lobbying challenges in court, even as the judge described their arguments as a real stretch. Is the Purple Line going to get built? Finally.
Yes, it will get built because judges are losing their patience with a small contingent of people in Chevy Chase and supporters of the Crescent Trail. And so it will be built. It hasn't gotten over all the hurdles. There are still contracts that have to be signed, including for the $900 million to come from the feds. But this is what's important about the purple line. In our region, there is a preponderance of housing in the east and a preponderance of jobs in the west. And the purple line will link the people who live in that housing in the east and help them to get to jobs in the west. So we need it.
Do we need it, Susan?
Absolutely. I was on the committee that studied it back in the 80s. I've said it all along. The red line, the subway system was spokes out of the center, and now we have jobs that go east-west, and this fills a critical need.
All right, before we leave the topic of transportation, Mark, yesterday Governor Hogan dedicated the Inter-County Connector after former Governor Bob Ehrlich. Was that a long overdue recognition?
I don't know about being overdue, but I think it was an appropriate recognition. This was an example of a bipartisan effort. Doug Duncan was very active in making that possible. It's a reflection of when this county, both at the state level and at the county level, made a commitment to get transportation, made it a priority and get things done.
I think it's ironic
but
that...
it was controversial. I mean, when I ran,
yes.
when I ran
Oh,
for,
no, no, yeah,
when I
no,
ran
no,
for
it was
county
very
council
controversial.
in 2000, that was the key issue, and I think that was the reason Pat Baptiste lost to Howie Dennis in the council race.
Absolutely. I mean, we made a political decision. Paris Glendenning was dead set against the ICC. Ehrlich was for it. Doug Duncan was for it.
This is the irony. It's mostly in Montgomery County. It's named It's named after him in a county that never once voted for him. It always overwhelmingly went for his opponent. I think that is true irony.
Well, Susan, won't that just burn your little...
It should be the Harriet Tubman road.
Every time you're riding on it.
I know, it should be.
Rich Parsons might say
Susan,
it should be the Rich
Susan,
Parsons
if it's
site.
Harriet Tubman, it should be going north-south, not east-west.
But
Susan, let me ask you a question. Since it took so long to build the ICC, wouldn't it make sense for the county council to have voted in favor of studying whether or not 40 or 50 years from now we need an outer bridge?
We don't have enough time on this show to talk about that
Don't
topic
dodge
because
the
it's
question.
time for
Yes
a break.
Yes or
It's
no?
time for a break.
Yes or
or
no, Susan? It
I'm
was
not on
a
the
dereliction
county-
of duty for the county council
think so,
not
yes.
to even study it. Those guys should be defeated next November. When we come back from this short break, Pepco wants more of your money, what to do about DACA, and when the county council hears about this show, it'll be my last. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Surprise, surprise, local electricity provider Pepco Electric, or Potomac Electric Power Company, is once again seeking an increase that would cost consumers an additional 5.5% per month in their bills. Mark, our society has become so dependent and growing more and more dependent every day on electric power. Is there no end to the price that we're going to have to pay for that commodity?
It's undoubtedly going up, but it's important to recognize that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've added in Montgomery County an energy tax, which has dramatically increased their power. We've also created mandates which require renewables, which are more expensive, to be a part of the mix. Basically, we have a political agenda with climate change to raise the cost of energy in a dramatic degree in order to encourage its use. So yes, to answer your question, we should expect power prices to continue to go up.
We
Does
all
Pepco
need
deserve
solar
it?
panels.
Does Pepco deserve the increase?
Well, they probably do, but understand that they're reflected. The tax isn't part of the tax increase, but the renewable portfolio standards, which were vetoed by the governor and was overridden, those are driving costs up for power.
Dan, you testified in opposition to the rate hikes. Why?
A fraud, because of the energy tax increase that went up 85% in 2010 by Montgomery County, a tax that they promised to sunset, is a tax that does not go to energy. It goes into the general fund and is spent as needed. That tax was promised to be sunset. It never was. And that money, that revenue should go to Pepco to help alleviate the costs of these service upgrades. In other words, we're getting hit over the head twice now as opposed to once. You're paying a higher rate to Pepco and you'll be paying a higher energy tax to Montgomery County. Why can't Montgomery County give the taxpayers some relief on we're already overtaxed and overregulated enough as it is. Give us a little relief is what I'm saying with the tax credits to give to Pepco. They gave $60 million to Marriott to move from one part of Bethesda to another. Why can't they give a tax credit to Pepco to help alleviate
Susan, what do you
some
think
of those
about that?
costs?
Isn't that a reasonable argument?
No, because the county's energy tax has nothing to do with the rates that Pepco are
It's a
giving
fraudulent
us. Because
It was a property
but
tax
we're not
described
talking about that.
as
We're
an energy
talking
tax
about
increase.
Pepco's increase.
Well, let Susan finish.
They've done a lot of work, and I think this should encourage all of us perhaps to put solar panels on our homes. But this is what's
Who's
also
paying for that?
it's almost free. But this is the thing that's interesting. WSSC is also going through the process of raising their rates, and hearings are going on about that also. So not only might Pepco go up, but our WSSC rates are likely to go up too, and it's also based on infrastructure that
All right,
it's
well,
been too far delayed.
We're gonna have to break it off here, but it seems like the costs of our utilities never seems to go down. All right, our last subject, which is going to be rather fun to discuss, is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program, which resulted from a controversial executive order by former President Barack Obama, and has been the target of conservative groups since its inception. And its repeal was one of President Trump's main campaign promises. This week, President Trump, in something of a surprise move, announced that he was rescinding the program, but extended the effective date for 6 months to allow Congress to act if it chose to address the thorny problem of immigration. Attorney General Sessions described the DACA program as unconstitutional because President Obama overstepped his bounds when doing so. Nonetheless, many still support the idea that people brought here illegally as toddlers were innocents that were caught up in a system that has failed them. Susan, the principle in President Trump's decision was that former President Obama overstepped his constitutional authority and that it's up to Congress to act. Isn't that a reasonable approach?
It is a vote, a decision that he made based on his conscience. George H.R.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, they all dealt with this issue of innocents coming here. The majority of Americans feel they should be able to stay. But the irony in all of this is President 45 did say, I'm going to deal with Congress. But he and his best friend Nancy Pelosi sent him a note saying, please say something. He sent out a tweet on Thursday saying, DACA kids, don't panic. I'll be there if Congress fails to act. I don't think he wants to do it. I don't think
There's a constitutional issue here, whether or not President Obama had the authority to do it.
But here's the
opportunity.
Yeah, but here's the opportunity, and I think it was a very appropriate thing for the president to do, to give this 6-month window. There is an opportunity for increased enforcement, construction of the wall, strengthening Verify, for enforcement changes, which have always been a component of an immigration compromise in exchange for DACA. So the question will be whether or not there's an opportunity, again, not just Republicans or Democrats, to reach common ground on this issue. And it provides some tough choices for legislators on all sides to whether or not they were able to reach that agreement in order to let the DACA kids stay.
I agree with
in
Mark.
exchange for enforcement.
Cynthia, there are reportedly 800,000 people considered DACA eligible. What impact is the delay going to have on them? And is Mark right? Is Congress going to be able to get its act together and do something here?
First of all, for young people who are currently DACA, whose authorizations are expiring before March 6th, they may reapply before early October, and have their employment status reauthorized for another 2 years. So that's something that many will be working on and reapplying for. But this is a political crucible that the president has set up for Democrats and Republicans to come together and to give a little on each side, because the American people do not want these 800,000 young people who are contributing economically to our nation to be forced to leave.
Well,
And
I
so
wanna
it'll
go
be
to-
very
I wanna
interesting
go
to see what
Dan.
happens in Congress.
Dan, I want to ask you the question.
Yes.
Was this a disappointment by President Trump? Were you disappointed by this decision by President Trump?
No, I wasn't. I'm glad that he is at least saying that a law should be made and not going through executive order. I never agreed with Obama did this by executive order, which I thought was wrong. Remember, he said originally he couldn't do these things by executive order, and then he did after he said he couldn't do it. I'm glad President Trump has put it back in the hands of
So
Congress.
are you happy that there's going to be a solution for these DACA kids?
Well, we'll see if there's a solution. I mean, Congress has a hard time getting anything
But
done
I
currently,
think
and,
that Trump will act on, and these kids.
Wait,
all,
why do you think he's going to act on it?
he will? Because he said it. He said it.
Wait,
this
wait, wait. But what can he? What
Well,
can he
you're
act-
right, you can't
What,
wait.
what
No.
can he act if it's unconstitutional, Susan?
Well, you know what's interesting?
Does he have a magic wand like President Obama did, and just sort of, bing, we're going to do it this
No,
way?
what's interesting about this, the legal challenge to this, just like his ban on travel, it is highly unlikely, I heard some legal scholars study this, that it would have been turned around because it is based on what he has said, that it was racist. But what's interesting,
Racist?
What?
Racist?
yes, just like the travel ban.
Has to do
He
with the law.
said
Racist.
This
on
is
the
not about
first
race.
day,
Has to do with the
he
law.
said that they are rapists and they're this and they're that.
Susan,
Has to do with the law.
Susan, you're really grasping at
No,
straws.
You're
It's the
actually
truth. It
you're
is
you're
true.
actually ignoring the case law that already exists on
But
on
these
this.
kids are vetted. They are safe. They have given all of their
But that's not-
information.
Like
They
the kids at
still
Rockville High
came
School,
here
they were
on-
vetted.
They were not DACA kids, by the way.
They were
There's
not
a
here
big.
legally.
They were not DACA
were not
kids.
here
Wait a minute.
They were not DACA kids, and these
Mark,
kids.
we got about a minute. Finish it up.
Well, I mean, there's been case law in this area already. It was the executive order was challenged, and it ran into a lot of problems. So,
We're talking about
you're talking
President
about
Obama's executive order.
original executive
Not to
order.
confuse it with-
Not to confuse it
Right.
with
They're
Trump.
gonna be
the way to
stained.
resolve this is through legislation, and that's and if I were you, I wouldn't wait and hope that
And-
Trump is going to extend it. I think the important
I
thing
think
is
he
And
will.
these,
Democrats
and these executive
Repub-
orders came from a chief executive who was impatient and unhappy because Congress continued to punt. So it's punt for punt for punt.
You mean
Yeah.
just because he was impatient, he could throw the Constitution down
For God's sake.
into the trash?
He
Is that
was
what, is
concerned
that
about
what you're
As-
asking? Is that
As
what you're asking about?
Remember, he-
President 45 did with the Muslim travel ban.
All
And the
right,
pardoning
everybody.
Yeah, you don't want to
of
hear that
Arpaio.
part, though, do you, Casey? I mean, Obama was
Susan,
criticized.
I love hearing everything that you have to say, except we're out of time, thankfully. Stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back. We haven't stopped sniping at each other. It's been fun on the set. Susan, lead us off with Parting Shots.
The president historically in our country has been a consoler in chief, and he brings us together in times of need. We do not have that right now. We have a president who pardoned a man who wasn't even sentenced yet and had been defeated and was a racist person. He went to North Dakota, and the governor told him that North Dakota was suffering from a drought, and he said, "Oh, I didn't know we had droughts this far north." He said, "But you're better off than the people down south where they have the opposite." So I guess that was supposed to make them feel better. He went to Texas the first time and said what a great crowd, and talked about his vote count in Missouri. And he went back a second time. He signed the wall, Donald Trump, and underneath he wrote, "Have a good time." This man is just hopeless, and I feel no consolation when I hear him speak.
Well, thank you, Susan. Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
All right, this last week, feel good and do good evening in Montgomery County at the Fillmore. 64 students received $2,000 college scholarships thanks to the generosity of businesses and individuals at the Montgomery County Executives Hispanic Gala. This was a wonderful event, and it was an exemplary example of Montgomery County generosity.
We're getting the sign. We're about out of time, so make it quick. Mark and Dan. Mark.
Well, applause for the Hogan administration for renaming the ICC after Bob Ehrlich. It was a great event.
Thank you. Dan, quickly.
And my parting shot is at the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce. Take down off the website that you are charging $50 to $70 for this debate in November for county executive, even though the Bethesda Beat says it's now free. Somebody's not telling the truth, or there's incompetence going on.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, panel. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Our first time back after our summer break. And for 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.